So let's have a look at exposing our actions as kind of public URL endpoints. And the first approach I'm going to use to do this is to create what's known as a web action. So for our Bitcoin action that we've already got deployed, to turn this into a web action, all I have to do is say whisk action update, give the action name, and then the flag --web true. And then once this is done, the platform is actually going to give you a unique URL endpoint to be able to invoke it without any authentication. You can retrieve the URL for your web action using the --URL flag with whisk action get. So now what I can say is, okay, I'm going to make a HTTP request from the command line to the particular URL that has been given to me. I'm going to add the JSON content type. I'm also going to add the command line parameters or query parameters to pass in the amount and the currency for my Bitcoin API. And OpenWhisk is then going to go and invoke my service function and serialize me the results of my execution back as JSON. So I'm getting the amount and the label from the conversion back as the results of my HTTP response as a kind of JSON object, and I've invoked that through the web action endpoint, so no authentication required. Web actions are a great way to be able to manage if you need a quick HTTP endpoint to handle something like a webhook, where you just need a quick way to be able to invoke it through a public URL endpoint. But for kind of more enterprise APIs, often what we want to do is we want to have things like rate limiting and core support and authentication. And with web actions, you have to handle all of those concerns using code in your source code. And so a nicer way to be able to do this is using the Whisk's API gateway. So this allows you to add HTTP endpoints that call the serverless function again, but actually can take care of all of those concerns around rate limiting and things like that for you. And you can manage this through the command line, but actually an easy way is to do it through the web management console. So in Bluemix, in IBM Cloud Functions, you have a management console which allows you to create APIs through the web. And you can say, create me a new API. You give the serverless function a name, you give it a path. And here you can start to add things in like kind of API routing. So based on the path and the verb of the HTTP operation, I want it to call a specific action. So here we can say, okay, it's going to be the path Bitcoin. It's going to call my action Bitcoin. It's going to serialize me back some JSON. And here you can toggle in all those features that kind of reference things like authentication and rate limiting and cause and all support. And these will be handled by the API gateway rather than you having to manually handle those in your code. So if I click save now, what it's going to give me is a unique URL endpoint that again I can then just interact with as sending unauthenticated HTTP requests. So let's try that from the command line now. So I can say HTTP get and give the URL. I'm going to give the path to the Bitcoin action. Again, use URL parameters to pass in queries for amount and currency. And hopefully it's just going to be giving me back the same JSON as we had through the web action. But now you can see I'm invoking it through a completely different API endpoint. So it's not the API for the platform, this is an API endpoint for that API gateway. And API gateways are great services to be able to add public scalable HTTP endpoints to your serverless functions and to be able to have it manage all those kind of enterprise features like scaling and routing and all of those kind of things that we need.